Los Angeles, still recovering from the terror once unleashed by the Hillside Stranglers, was about to descend into another nightmare. It was 1985. Within a matter of months, the LAPD but there was someone obsessed with Satanism, a worshiper of darkness. The signs were clear. He was doing this for something more than violence. He was feeding a twisted belief system. She had fought back until her last breath. The obvious shoe print was on her face, and then just a kilometer away another woman, Sophie Dickman, was attacked. One clue, he memorized part of the license plate. That tip led police to a stolen orange Toyota. Inside was a fingerprint, a plastic case, and a dental card from a Chinatown clinic. No one could predict where he'd strike next. The alarm had failed. The Night Stalker had slipped through their fingers once again. Single piece of the suspect had visited for a toothache and was due for a follow-up. But no one had imagined the quiet drifter with rotting teeth was capable of such monstrous acts. Ramirez's photo was published in every major newspaper across the state. Eyes widened. Panic set in. On every front page, his face stared back. A crowd began whispering, pointing, murmuring. But Ramirez didn't see it. Was on a bus, returning from Arizona. Two officers were posted in plain clothes to wait for his return. The net tightened as tips came flooding in. A man named Armando Rodriguez, tracing a stolen necklace, gave police a new lead. A name Richard Ramirez, assaulted children, left satanic symbols behind. But at one house he lingered too long. Left behind a bullet casing, his signature shoe print, and witnesses who finally gave police enough for a composite sketch. But senior officials saw it as a waste of resource. Zan pulled the officers. Instead, they installed a silent alarm. Consistent, tried to steal a car, was chased by a local man, hit with a metal bar, beaten, surrounded by an angry crowd. Evidence on November 7, 1989, he was sentenced to death 14 times over. Left one woman, Doreen, even married him in 1996. Convinced he was innocent. Behind it, many crime. He died in 2030, not from execution, but from cancer. His death left behind no legacy, only trauma, broken families, and unanswered pain. Scenes, a tale of horror, fear, and the failure of systems that let monsters roam free far too long. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want more true crime stories like this. After that, no one came to visit him again. Shoe print found itself facing a war, tied up with electrical tape, brutally assaulted, and beaten with a hammer. Mabel didn't survive. Florence barely clung to life. At the scene, an inverted pentagram was drawn in lipstick on the wall and on the victim's legs. New horror, a series of brutal assaults and murders that left the city paralyzed in fear. 11 women had already turned up, dead, beaten, sexually assaulted, mutilated. There was no pattern, no motive, no mercy. But this time, it wasn't two cousins like Angelo Buono and Kenneth Bianchi. This time, the monster was working alone. He struck like a ghost in the night, choosing victims of every age, race, and gender. Children. The company had recently launched a black size 11.5 men's design. Out of the 1,356 pairs shipped to the U.S., only 6 black pairs in that size existed, and just one had been sold in Los Angeles. The elderly, one city, a suspect fled the scene, but detectives found a pentagram drawn on the window of a stolen car he'd used. One killer. Couples. No one was safe, and no one knew who would be next. What puzzled detectives most was the randomness. There was no method to his madness. He used guns, he used knives, but not just any print. This print was traced back to an obscure new sneaker brand, Avia. As detectives worked backwards through unsolved cases, they came across an incident from May 29, 1985. 2 elderly sisters, Mabel Bell and Florence Lang. This was no ordinary criminal. Shortly after, police received a report from a young woman in Eagle Rock who escaped a kidnapping attempt. He was always 2 steps ahead. Then came July 7th. 61-year-old Joyce Nelson was found in her Monterey Park home, her face beaten beyond recognition. The city was under siege. The news broke. Los Angeles had a serial killer on the loose. People panicked. Gun sales soared. Families rushed to buy locks, guard dogs, and home security systems. But it didn't help. He attacked in Glendale, in San Francisco, in Orange County. He crossed city lines, always changing, always vanishing. Then finally, a break. 13-year-old James Romero spotted a suspicious car late at night. Detectives Gil Carrillo and Frank Salerno rushed to question the dentist. On July 15th, the dentist called in panic. He was here. Days later, he struck again. Slashed a man's throat. Shot a woman in the face. The media now had a name. The Night Stalker. Fear gripped the city. But just as detectives were closing in, Ramirez fled. Los Angeles. The moment that name entered LAPD records, everything changed. The fingerprints matched. So did the face. Ramirez had a record for petty theft. On August 30th, 1985, police held a massive press conference. August 31st, As he stepped off the Greyhound in East LA, he walked into a liquor store. It's him. He bolted, jumped on a bus. Passengers froze, recognizing him. One slipped off and called police. Ramirez sprinted down streets. By the time LAPD arrived, the mob had already done its job. The Night Stalker was finally in custody. Cue music shift to solemn, haunted tone at his first court appearance. Richard Ramirez raised his hand and revealed a pentagram carved into his palm. "Hail Satan," he said. He was charged with 43 counts including 30 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. But this wasn't the end. Ramirez gained a cult following. Women sent him love letters. Some called him handsome. That fantasy shattered in 2009 when DNA linked Ramirez to the 1984 rape and murder of a 9-year-old girl. Ramirez spent nearly 28 years on death row in San Quentin. The victims never got justice in time. The city never got closure, and the devil they feared turned out to be all too human. This was the second and final part of our deep dive into the case of Richard Ramirez the Night Stalker.